Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Kristy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Friends and Fiction Show. I'm Kristy Woodson Harvey.
I'm Kristin Harmel.
And this is Friends and Fiction, 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories to support indie bookstores, authors, and librarians. Tonight, we are thrilled to welcome Liane Moriarty to discover her new novel, Here One Moment. The book was just released on September 10th, and we are so excited to speak with Liane about it.
But first, we have just a quick reminder to check out all the fun things going on in our Friends and Fiction community at friendsandfiction.com.
There you'll find our show schedule, details on upcoming in-person events, and links to our bookshop.org page, to the Friends and Fiction official book club, starting well, with Brenda and Lisa, to our merch store and our newsletter sign up. In other words, if you want to know more about anything Friends and Fiction offers, and we offer a lot, be sure to check out friendsandfiction.com.
You know, I feel like we really made a mistake with the alliteration in our show name because it's a tongue twister every week.
Like it just starts it off with Friends and Fiction official, but I mean, it's a tongue twister for sure.
Totally is our mistake. All right. So we also encourage you to find our Friends and Fiction Endless Stories newsletter on Substack. You can read all of our free weekly posts on the Substack website or app. And if you subscribe, the posts will land right in your inbox, so you'll never miss a thing. It is so much more than just an email newsletter. For paid subscribers, we offer incredible extra content, including deeper dives with all our weekly show guests, plus monthly roundtable discussions between the 4 of us and our other author friends, such as the one Patti and Ron just did with several well-known librarians about the magic and the secrets of libraries. It costs just $5 a month or $50 a year for the paid subscription. But remember, you can always start out free, join us, be part of our community there, and you can upgrade at some point in the future if you want to. So check us out at friendsandfiction.substack.com.
Okay, now let's welcome our friend Liane Moriarty. Liane is the author of #1 New York Times bestsellers, Big Little Lies, The Apples Never Fall, The Husband's Secret, and Truly Madly Guilty, along with the New York Times bestsellers 9 Perfect Strangers, What Alice Forgot, The Last Anniversary, The Hypnotist's Love Story, and 3 Wishes.
Big Little Lies, 9 Perfect Strangers, and Apples Never Fall were all adapted into popular television series with star-studded casts including Nicole Kidman, Reese Witherspoon, Melissa McCarthy, and Annette Bening. Liane lives in Sydney, Australia, with her husband and 2 children.
I loved all of those adaptations, by the way.
Me too.
Oh,
Fantastic.
So fantastic. Nicole Kidman in 9 Perfect Strangers. Anyway, this is a whole rabbit hole, but that's not here. That is not what we're going to talk about tonight. We're talking about her new novel, Here One Moment, was just released on September 10th, and it is a brilliantly constructed tale that looks at free will and destiny, grief and love, and the endless struggle to maintain certainty and control in an uncertain world. Kirkus Review called it a fresh, funny, ambitious, and nuanced take on some of our oldest existential questions in a starred review. And Kristin and I both can't stop talking about it.
Yeah.
All right, Sean, can you bring Liane on?
Hello, it's lovely to be here.
Hey. Thank you. Thanks for coming. We are so happy to have you here on the Friends and Fiction Show. And we cannot wait to dive into this book. So for everyone out there who has not had the pleasure of reading it yet, Here One Moment is the wholly original, thought-provoking, and meticulously plotted story of a delayed flight and a woman who comes to be known as the Death Lady, who walks around the plane predicting the manner and age of each passenger's death. This makes the passengers uneasy, of course, but they try to shake the predictions off. until a few months later, the first passenger dies exactly as the death lady predicted. Then 2 more passengers die, just as she said they would. The story plays out from the viewpoint of the death lady herself, as well as 6 of the other passengers whose death she has apparently foretold. So that's a bit about what this book is about. So can you tell us a little bit more? And then our favorite question on Friends and Fiction, can you tell us what this book is really about?
Oh goodness, that seems a tricky one. What's it really about? I think you already answered that with saying that it's about grief and that line that I wrote myself as a ex-advertising copywriter. I like to write the blurbs. So about maintaining control in an uncertain world. But
Yeah.
I'm not one of those authors who has a particular message to convey or who thinks I'm about to explore this particular theme. I don't know if you
Sure.
often get asked this question where they say to you, what would you like readers to go away with when they finish reading your book? And I always say, I'd like them to think, I'd quite like to read another book by this Liane Moriarty.
That's a great
I don't
answer.
have a message in particular to convey. For me, it was just that premise of how would you feel if somebody's, uh, predicts your death. And I guess I did think perhaps people would have amazing revelations about how they should lead their lives. But what I then realized was if somebody told you how they thought you were going to die, the first thing is, would you believe it?
Right.
It's just the same as if you were given a terminal diagnosis. The first thing you'd say is, I don't believe it. Then you'd say, I want a second opinion. Then you'd say, I want a different treatment plan. I want to enroll in a clinical trial. I want whatever it takes. And of course, I had my character hand out predictions like, you're going to die in a workplace accident. So you wouldn't just say, oh, okay, I'm going to die in a workplace accident. You'd think, I'm going to stop going to work. So I guess in answer to your question, it then became about fate. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Leon, we have so many questions for you about this book, which is like nothing we've ever read. I mean, it just truly felt so unique. And I think, as we said, so well constructed, so well put together. But before we get to all those questions, I want to start off with a very basic one. Can you tell us the origin story for this novel? How did you get the idea?
I can. So I was on a flight myself, just like the characters in the book, in the exact same location. So I was flying out of Hobart in Tasmania, which is the little island state at the bottom of Australia, which often gets left off the map, or the Tasmanians get very cranky about that. And I just spent a week there writing, so I was in that sort of inward state of mind, which I'm sure you know about, when you've spent a long time without talking to anybody. I don't know if this happens to you, but so I'm definitely not an extroverted sort of person, but when I've spent a week's writing, I turn into my mother. I then find that I go into shops and I start talking to people in shops. And I can remember actually on that trip that I went into a shop and I bought some earrings, which by chance, because I'm wearing green, these are the actual earrings.
Oh, wow.
But I was telling this whole story about how I was buying them for my sister because they were, what's the word for when they're not, she's got allergies. She needs a hypo something or other. And I made up this whole story just so I could keep chatting. And my sister, who's a lawyer, said, well, I'm contractually obliged to give her those earrings now. But as you can see, I did not. I'm wearing them. So that's the state of mind that I was in. And I was on this flight, and then it was a long delay, and people were making phone calls back home to everybody. And and I didn't have a book. I had no book to
Ooh, oh, that's the worst.
I know. And the cheerful thought came into my mind that every single passenger on this plane is going to die. I know. And there were a few reasons, I think, when I look back at that time, why I was considering my own mortality. So, first of all, my sister was diagnosed with breast cancer. Then I lost my dad. Oh,
Sorry.
thank you, thank you. And to be honest, I've led a really sort of lucky life because in talking to so many people who have experienced unexpected deaths so much earlier in their lives, but I think in the Western world we're used to things being able to be fixed.
Yeah.
And I can remember when we were planning my dad's funeral, the funeral director said to us, he's had people who come to him, excuse me, they're planning their parents' funeral and they've never actually been to a funeral before.
Oh,
I know.
wow.
So and I think we avoid thinking about death and talking about death. So anyway, I'd lost my dad. And then we had the pandemic when I think all of us sort of stared at death in the face for a while. And then
Yeah.
I myself was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so my sister and I are both fine now, but it definitely was at a time in my life. And also, I'm in my 50s, and I read an article recently which said that the time between your 40s and your 60s, they call it Sniper's Alley, because when I know when you can get all these terrible
Yeah.
diagnoses, if that's a plural of diagnoses.
Yeah. I think so.
And funnily enough, as I've been talking about this, a few people have come up to me at events and asked me to sign the book, Welcome to Sniper's Alley, which I'm not sure they seem to. Anyway, I thought it was sort of. Uh,
I feel like that should be our new show slogan, since we're all in that same general range.
um, so that was I was in right in the middle of Sniper's Alley, and I was thinking that everybody's going to die, and so I was looking at the fellow passengers, and I was thinking, so will you be the one who makes it to 100? Will you be the one
Ah,
whose life is unexpectedly cut short? And that's when it occurred to me that at some point in the future, somebody would be able to look back and look at all the names of the passengers on that flight, and they would be able to literally list the name, the age and cause of death, including for myself. So those would be facts. They were just facts that weren't available right now. And for some reason, that's very obvious. It's obvious, but it sort of blew my mind. And that's when I thought,
Yeah.
imagine if it happened right now, if those facts were available right now and somebody walked down the plane and sharing those predictions.
It's such an interesting origin story. And Liane, I shared this with you before we went on today too, but I'm also a breast cancer survivor. I was diagnosed in late 2022. So it sounds like you and I
Similar
probably
times, yeah,
right
yeah.
around the same time. Yeah, I'm very sorry to hear you went through that. I didn't realize at the time. I would have reached out since we were
Me too to you.
fighting it together. Thank you. I'm glad to hear you're doing well. I feel like that time in my life changed me a lot in ways both small and big, and I think it changed me as a writer a little bit too. Do you think that there's anything about that fight you had with cancer that changed the way you look at the world or the way you look at your books or the way you write your books? Did it change anything about you?
Uh, I don't know if it did. One thing, I was constantly comparing myself to my sister, and my sister had to have a far more aggressive treatment. And I'm older than her. So I think part of it for me, and also it was caught early
Yeah.
because of my sister. And so,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
because I was very aware that I needed to be up to date with my mammograms, and also in a way because of my dad, because I'd had the previous mammogram on the day that he died. And so I knew the exact day that it was due. So I was
Oh, wow.
literally right on time. So it was caught early. There were a few days where that terror where you're waiting for
Yes.
biopsy
Yeah.
results. And I could tell from the woman doing the scan that it wasn't going to be good. And there were a few moments where I had that absolute a feeling of terror. But then because it was caught early, I was then on that, this will be fine, and on we go. So I don't. So I did write one article where I said I didn't stare at my own mortality right on. I gave it a sideways glance.
Huh. Yeah.
So that's how I feel. I feel more that combination of all those things I mentioned led to the premise for this. I don't know how has it changed you. I'm really interested how it's changed you as a writer.
I think it's made me look out more than in, if that makes sense. And I've never actually put it into words before. Obviously, I was always taking the world in and and putting it on paper.
Yeah.
But I think that writing was for me a very solitary pursuit before that, and now it feels like a more inclusive pursuit where I don't know that's not well put. See, I should ask questions. I can't articulate my own
But
answer
it's something.
to. You got me. Leon.
But it's something. Maybe there aren't words for it.
Yeah.
And I do think that's something about. I remember reading that somewhere that as we all get older, we all turn more outward. Anyway,
Yeah.
that was part of the joy of becoming older. So perhaps that it's that as well.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I'm glad that you're both on the other side
Mm.
of that journey, and grateful for all the things that you've written since, whether they affected you knowingly or not. So, Liane, from a craft perspective, what you've done here is really interesting. You've written this story from 7 different perspectives that all feel very distinct from one another. We're rooting for Leo, Sue, Allegra, Paula, Ethan, Eve, and even the Death Lady herself. And remarkably, with that many overlapping storylines, we never lose track of who's who or even of what their death predictions are. So can you talk to us a bit about how you actually went about constructing this story?
Yeah, so I'm somebody who's always writing from multiple perspectives, and every single time I write a book, I say my next one, I'm going to write it from just one character's point of view.
Me too, and I can't do it.
I know, and because I know sometimes readers get annoyed with me because I have too many characters.
No, never.
I don't know.
Keep doing it.
Well, that's what some readers say. But I have seen some readers have put down little cheat sheets at the beginning of the books to try and keep track of them all. And but I like you. Every time I think I'm going to do it, then I write. Excuse me. Then I write 9 Perfect Strangers. Or then I write a book with an entire plane load of passengers. And I said this actually in conversation to the amazing Karen Joy Fowler, and she was saying that she thinks every author has a desire to write the book they're incapable of writing.
Yes.
Which I found really interesting, and I think, and maybe her just saying that has maybe released me from this desire to write from one character's perspective. Are you a planner, Kristy, or are you?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Not at all. And so I'm wondering, and that's I think the problem, because I used to tell myself like, it's going to be one character or 2 maximum, maybe 2.
Yeah.
And then I get in there and I'm like, oh, but she's got to talk about that, and I really need him to talk about that. So, do you outline, or are you just?
No, I don't. And so I do think that might be part of it. That because I'm working it out as I go along, then I need to switch to another character's perspective to keep working it all out in the background, because I don't know what's going to happen to that character. So I need to leave them be for a moment.
Ooh,
Well, the
that's
way you do it feels so
fascinating.
natural too. It's
Yeah.
not prescriptive the way that you do it. It's not like I don't know how to, but you manage it so well that I
Yeah,
don't know why
yeah.
anyone would need a cheat sheet. You manage it so it seems like, well, that's the obvious place for this person to come in.
Oh,
So
good. Well, thank you. And the other thing I do try to do is make it easy for the reader by, never having characters with the same first initial and having the
yeah,
idea of,
Yes.
having different
that is very
long
helpful.
names, short names, all that sort of thing,
Yeah.
and to give a little hint in that very first sentence so they're immediately into that character's, a little reminder for them. Um,
Oh, that's
yeah, but I
perfect.
do think if I was a planner, maybe I could stay in the one in the one character's perspective. Um,
I think what you're doing is kind of working. So I would probably just stick with what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you
Things
you
should be
seem
going
to have it down.
okay for you.
Yeah.
I was thinking, oh, well, that's all. I was taking you very seriously at first when you said, "Is everything okay, isn't it?"
We're reading all your like number one New York Times
Yeah.
bestsellers and all your
You
TV shows.
you've
I
done
think the
okay.
writing process is your friend right now. So I
Well, I think the thing is that if we all just we can only write the way we can write. So I've got two sisters who are authors, and one of my sisters, she's a planner, and we've both tried each other's way of writing, and we both say, "I don't understand. How do you do it?" She says, "How do you possibly not know without a plan?"
Yeah.
And I think, how can you possibly plan without just getting into it? So,
yeah,
yeah.
that's how I
Leanne, my sister is a novelist too, and also writes very differently from me. And it's just now occurring to me, you and I are basically the
Oh,
same
really?
person, breast
It's
cancer
true.
sisters who write. Yeah, I love it.
It's true. You really
So,
are.
Except slight, success differential. But
so
yes,
are
yeah.
you're not a planner
Um,
either? We're all non-planners.
no, I actually, yes, you
You're the
got me there.
planner.
That is
Okay.
one area we are different. I write historical
Oh,
fiction, so
you
I think that
need,
dealing with such a volume of research,
yes,
it helps me a lot to have that the framework
yes,
once I've kind of fleshed the world out.
sure.
Um, Listening to you talk about how you crafted this story, without any spoilers, I'm curious whether you knew how the Death Lady's story was going to turn out. Did you know her background from the start?
So I did know yes, without spoilers, I did know just who she was, that the one thing that
Okay.
you're referring to. And because in fact I had thought when I came up with that premise, I thought, well, there had been other books before where people are told how they're going to die. And I was thinking, so I don't think that's quite enough. But then when I came up with who she could be, then I thought, no, I think that's original enough. But that's all I
Yeah.
knew, those and I still didn't know
Okay.
anything. So for me, I do the research as I'm writing. So as I was doing the research, that sort of her personality developed as a result of what I had to learn about. Mm,
Okay. Oh,
mm.
interesting. Okay.
So interesting. Okay, so this is something that Kristin and I discussed. So we imagine that you must have asked yourself this question while you were writing. If you were one of the passengers on the plane and the death lady predicted an early death for you, what would you do? Would you believe her and would you change your life with the time you theoretically had left?
Uh, so yeah, a lot of people have asked me, would you want to know? And some people have said to me, well, actually, that's the reality for some people if they're going to get genetic testing for something in their family.
That's true.
So I know that if I was in that, so I'm just straightening my necklace. So if I was in that situation, I would want to know. Um, but if I was given and of course that's a reality too for some people if my breast cancer had been terminal, I don't think I would have changed anything much. I think I'd just like what most people say, that you just spend time with the people that you love, and say everything that that hasn't been said. But I think I've said most things, and yeah, yeah. But also, just as I said earlier, I'd still be fighting it. I'd still be saying, "Come on, there must be something." I think it's part of me still doesn't really believe, even when I see those articles where people are talking about ticking off their bucket lists and all that sort of thing. I'm thinking to myself, and they've reached this acceptance, and I'm thinking, no, no, can't you look so well? Isn't there something? Isn't there something we can do? Which shows that I still haven't reached that acceptance. I still resist each time.
I think one of the things that was the most like harrowing to read, and I mean, I don't think this is a spoiler because it happens so early in the book, but to be the mother who's told
Yeah.
the agent cause of death for her
Yes.
child. And, it's not really a question. Well, maybe there's a question in there of, I guess that just came as you were writing. I thought that was really brilliant. And I thought the way that I can't remember who said this, but the way that you land the plane is just, it's so good. It's so good.
So, of course, we cannot talk to you without asking about Big Little Lies, your hit novel, which has been adapted into a hugely acclaimed Emmy winning HBO series starring Nicole Kidman and Reese Witherspoon. In fact, your delightfully tongue in cheek bio on your website describes it like this: Nicole Kidman and Reese Witherspoon snapped up the film and television rights. Liane was so dazzled by their combined star power, she became briefly disoriented, but recovered in time to accept their offer. Liane managed to make it up on stage at the Emmys without tripping, which she considers one of her life's major achievements. So, first, congratulations on the not tripping and also on the Emmys. Second, can you tell us a little bit about how this project came about, how it changed your life, and how it feels seeing such incredible actors playing these characters you created?
So it came about, I was just told that Nicole Kidman wanted to meet me in Sydney because I know. So I can tell you what it was like. That I went to a cafe to meet her, and the cafe was closed. And so I thought to myself, well, I don't know what it's like with these big Hollywood stars. Maybe it's closed just for her. So I went around the cafe, and there was a kitchen there, and I could see the people in there. And so I said to them, "Are you closed?" And they said yes. But then I thought I should let them know that I was in with the Hollywood people. So I made meaningful eye contact, and I said, "Are you closed for everyone?" And they said, I know. And they said, "Yes, we're closed for everyone." So that
Don't you know who I am? This is my favorite story.
So then they sent me to another cafe, and then I got to that cafe, and I said, "I am here to meet somebody." And you could see the man thinking, "Has this woman never been to a cafe before?" So anyway, I then finally met her, and she was lovely and warm. But I had books. I don't know if you've had books optioned where nothing comes of it.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the years just roll by.
Yes.
So my first book to be optioned was What Alice Forgot, and I can always remember that because my little boy, who's now 16 and towers above me, he was at that Jimbaroo. Do you have Jimbaroo where, yeah, the little
Something
place?
similar, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I was on the phone to my agent who was talking about this film deal. And I said, "Oh, but I've got to go because it's parachute time." The parachute.
Which is the best part. It's the best.
I know their little faces when and it's just, I know, I know. So yeah, so therefore I was excited to meet her, but I really didn't think anything would
Yeah.
come of it. And I said to her, "So I know not to get too excited because other authors have always told me don't get too excited until the day they start shooting, and And she said, no, if we option it, get excited, because we won't be optioning it
Oh,
just for the sake of it. And so, yeah, it turned out she was right. Um, and as to how it's changed my life, I always think of it as, well, first of all, I hope you will forgive me for this, but I do like to point out that it debuted at #1 before there was any,
yes.
thank you for allowing me to do that, before there was any
I would want
news.
to point that out also.
Thank
I
you.
Duly noted.
feel like that you should just get that tattooed, like, right here. Yeah.
Already
#1
number
before. Yeah, that's
one.
right. Because of course there are lots of stories that, when you read stuff that imply
Yeah.
that it was. Anyway, obviously the series brought me many new readers, and it
Yeah.
does mean that if you're in a taxi and you get chatting and they say, "What do you write?" And they have no idea who you are. And if I say Big Little Lies, then they might have seen the show. So that's nice. Yeah, and of course, it brought me many new readers who would otherwise never have read my books. And it also just meant that I had the wonderful, what I describe as just a wonderful perk of the job, being able to visit a film set, see how it all works. But I wasn't one of those authors who leaned in and got really involved with it. I just was like a very interested bystander, and it was just a lot of fun. But for me, the end goal is still the book. The
Yep.
book is not, and I've stolen this line from somebody. I can't remember who it was, but I was in an article, and he was saying, I don't want people to think that the books are just a midpoint along the way to the eventual adaptation.
Right.
And that's how I feel, because the book's between
Yes.
us and our readers.
And I feel like you can go so much deeper in a book too. And there's and it's the point at which you were the only cook in the kitchen. Like there's something
Right.
really special
Yeah.
about that, I think.
Yeah.
Exactly,
And
because
sometimes I feel a little offended when people are like, "Oh, and if it gets a show or gets it, like, then it'll really," and I'm thinking like,
it's
"No, like, what do you mean? Like,
not.
this was the thing." Like,
Yes,
it's cool.
exactly. As if, yeah, that's the only thing that matters if it's made into a show.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
exactly. Mm.
Well, speaking of your incredible shows and the unbelievable actors playing characters you've created, I'm like, let's not talk about the shows, but let's talk some more about the shows. No.
I'm
Um,
happy to talk about the shows.
You've also had 2 other hit television shows based on your novels: Nine Perfect Strangers for Hulu, starring Nicole Kidman, Melissa McCarthy, Michael Shannon, and Luke Evans, and Apples Never Fall for Peacock, starring Annette Bening, Sam Neill, Jake Lacey, and Allison Brie. So has anything about the TV adaptation experience, I think you kind of answered this, but maybe just to like put a finer point on it, has it changed how you think about your future novels, or are you really able to separate that?
I really am, although I think people don't believe me. But I've always had a lot of inner monologues. And I always say, with Nine Perfect Strangers, I read something somewhere that she wrote it with an eye on the future adaptation.
Huh.
But it was a silent retreat for many days. So there was no dialogue for many pages, where it was all just thoughts.
Yeah.
And I often have characters thinking one thing and doing something else. And I think if I started to think, well, how would they do that? And if it ever does occur to me, then I just think, well, that's their problem. The one thing I took from the seeing the adaptations was I just noticed the way the actors created characters in the same way that
Huh.
we create characters,
Yeah.
that they're
Yeah.
taking things from their own lives. And I noticed how important gestures were. Not Nicole, Meryl Streep has this thing. She picks up a necklace and she does that. And I thought, I bet she's seen somebody do that. And the only thing that I have this little list of things in front of my computer, reminding myself about ways to improve a scene. And I just wrote, remember the gestures. So that was something that
Ooh.
the actors sort of taught me, that
Interesting.
to think of that.
That
Oh,
makes a lot of
I
sense.
really like that. And it's a good piece of advice for Kristy and I to bear in mind
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
It's hard to describe gestures. So I say that, but how do
Yeah.
you describe this? I don't know. But yeah, it's just
It
something
is.
to have in mind.
You're right. It is very hard. It's hard to describe. I think it's hard to describe facial expressions too
Yeah.
Yes, isn't it? Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's true. Well, Liane, can we ask what's up next for you? Are you working on another novel now?
Well, I am actually working on a sequel to Big Little Lies. So I'm not.
Yay! I just read it for the second time, so I'll be ready.
So because I wrote that when the children my two children were just starting school, and now my children are teenagers, and so I will also admit that there seems to be a desire for a third season but so I'm not confirming a third season. All I'm confirming is that I thought, well, I may as well write this because this is the one book where it does seem to make sense that now
Yes.
they're teenagers and my teens are providing a lot of material.
Yeah.
But it's a sequel to the book, so therefore it's set in Australia and I do have to remember, I must admit, there are some characters that didn't make it into the TV show, so I embarrassingly forgot about them. So I know. So when I
Yeah.
picked up the book, if you recently read it, you might not. So Madeline had another child called Fred, and I picked up the book and I thought, oh, that's right, Fred.
Poor Fred.
I know. So then I was thinking, should I do something quite meta and have, Fred as a teenager, he never comes out of his room. He's playing games. Somebody says, oh, it's like Fred just doesn't exist. And then I can just move on from Fred. But I won't.
Oh, I love it.
Okay, so I have to add, this is not an official question, but do your teenagers have like their own dialect going on that you have to, or is that just American?
Oh,
I have
no,
an
for
almost
sure.
13-year-old. Yeah.
Well,
Okay. And I'm like, what? None of this is real language. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
but some of it's good. Have you heard of this is when I really like glazing. If you're glazing
Oh,
me.
gla glazing is a super yes. So we had a tropical storm today here, so we didn't have school, and Will had some friends over. Yeah, we glazing is a big one. Other things that they say. That's so amazing that has like
Yeah, that it travels the world. Yep.
travels the globe. I
Yeah.
love it. I can't
Yeah.
wait to tell them that.
It's already beginning with my 8-year-old too.
Oh,
Yeah.
Just
Oh,
the
sure.
words that come out of his mouth. I'm like, what? What are you saying?
What
I
does that
know.
mean? Anyway. Okay, well, Liane, if you would stick around for just a second, we have a little bit more to talk to you about, but
Yep.
we have a couple reminders.
For all of you watching and listening, we encourage you to rush out and buy your copies of Here One Moment. The perfect place to do that is in the Friends and Fiction shop on bookshop.org. Be getting it at a discount and helping to fund our show, all while supporting our guests and our beloved independent booksellers nationwide.
We also want to remind you to follow us on Instagram and join our Facebook group, which is not nearly, it is officially 250,000 members strong. When you visit friendsandfiction.com, you can stay up to date about everything we have going on, and you can sign up for Friends and Fiction Endless Stories on Substack, which is chock full of bonus content.
All right, Liane, our last question for you is an easy one. Can you tell everyone out there how to connect with you and where we might be able to find you online and on book tour?
Yeah, you would think that was an easy question, wouldn't you? So I am on Facebook with not nearly as many followers as you. And so how do you give a Facebook? So I don't do this. So how do you give a Facebook? Do you have to do you just look them up on Facebook? Is that what you say?
They can find you. They know what to
Okay,
do.
yeah. So I'm on
Yeah, so
Facebook.
we can find you on Facebook.
And I'm
Okay.
only recently joined Instagram because people were pretending to be me on Instagram and selling off courses. So then I thought, and it seemed to be the only way to show people that it wasn't me, was to be me.
Oh, wow.
I'm on Instagram as well. But so I'm not very good at social media, as you can tell by my poor lighting, and you're so beautifully lit.
Oh, stop!
No. So would your kids say that since you didn't know your social media that you sold, Liane?
I haven't heard that one. What does
You haven't heard that one? Okay, so like this, if they like miss a shot in basketball, like for example, like that's what I hear the most. You're like, oh, you sold.
You sold.
So you hear that one coming up.
I'll be ready. I'll say, I did not.
No, you did great. You did great. Oh, Liane, this was so much fun. Thank you for talking to us about this incredible book that truly, you're not on Instagram much, so you haven't seen me tag you in this.
Well, thank you for tagging me. I think that's important, apparently. Thank you.
Yeah, it was great. So, Kristin and I can't stop talking about Here One Moment, and
Yep.
I got to tell you, I know you don't write these for TV, but if this one is not an adaptation, someone's going to be hearing from me. I'm sure but we really appreciate you being here and sharing so openly with our readers about just your inspiration for this book and all of your incredible success. It's been a real joy. So thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much. I had a lot of fun too.
Oh, well, we loved having you. So to everyone out there, be sure to tune in next week when Patti and Mary Kay will welcome Jean Hanff Korelitz to discuss her new novel, The Sequel, which is the sequel to The Plot. That's like very meta, right? That show will air on the Friends in Fiction Facebook page and YouTube channel on Wednesday, October 2nd at 7 p.m. Eastern. And it'll be published on our podcast for your listening pleasure on Friday, October 4th.
Thanks to all of you out there for being with us. We'll see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.